Today, we're unpacking the latest Xbox dumpster fire, diving deep into the Helldivers 2 community backlash, discussing some fun video game release date rumors, and more top headlines of the week. And if that isn't enough, we're revealing our picks for the biggest video game moments that blew our minds. Welcome, friends, to this week's episode of Good Playing With You, the weekly gaming podcast. I'm Dan Whitehill, and I'm joined by our good playing good buddy, Matt Lord.
Hey, how's it going?
And because Xbox news was so spicy this week, we brought in two special guests, Noelle Stewart.
Hi.
And Eric Eckstein.
Hello.
Maulding's out on vacation this week. We've got a packed show, but before we dive in, let's check in with our guests and learn more about them. First off, we have Noelle Stewart. Noelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I've been gaming since I was about, 3. But if I really, the games that I remember the most missed was one of my first games that I really remember blowing my mind and spending hours on the computer. And then, I don't know, Dust. Not a lot of people have played Dust, but it was like you were a cowboy, but you didn't know, you forgot who you were. You didn't know where you were, and you had to like click and figure it out. But you know, I've had all the Segas, the GameCube and 64, up until today, where I really sort of refound my love through the PlayStation 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2 really brought me back into gaming a lot more.
Nice. Love to hear it. Thanks, Noelle. Also joining us today is a former coworker of mine from way back in the G4 days, Eric Eckstein.
Hey, Dan. Hey, everyone.
Hey.
So I've been gaming actually since I was an embryo, and I've come into play just with the controller in my hand, clearly. Love video games, worked with Dan at G4 during some really exciting times, Attack of the Show, X-Play, all the goodies. We have stories that we'll tell on another podcast maybe, but for now, there's been I'm an Xbox diehard, which is interesting that I'm in this conversation about the state of affairs with Xbox these days.
You're the expert then. You're ready to bring the heat.
I mean, I'm the sad expert, I guess. I'm a little sad these days, but very excited for where gaming is my personal passion. Like I turn to games where other people turn to movies or potato chips. Like I will always play games. I'll play it probably on my deathbed, and excited to talk games with all of you.
Nice. And when we were at G4, weren't you, what was your title? You were the editor-in-chief or something like that? You were like the head guy.
I ran the editorial
connections.
Team. Well, I mean, it was a team effort, as you know. It's not. It takes a village, an RE8 village, but RE7 village rather. So I ran the editorial teams at G4TV.com, which was like kind of the digital arm, and we were doing, going on all the shows, the live streams, all that kind of stuff. We created a lot of fun content, and those were really awesome times. I loved it.
Agreed. All right, well, welcome to you both. It's awesome to have you. As you might know, we like to kick off the show by talking about what we're playing this week. I know that's real original, and we totally own it. So why don't you kick us off, Lord, and tell us what you've been up to?
Sure. I got like a bad Overwatch 2 bug lately, and I'm just stuck in Elo hell. I cannot get out of gold. I'm just playing solo, and if you know any solo players out there, you're just like, it can be either the best thing, you're on like a god tier team, or you're just in the worst team ever, just getting rolled. And I'm in the roll stage right now, so things are going poorly, and I'm tanking. But it's still a good time, and I was able to play a lot of Fallout 3 on the train today. Noelle and I actually took a train for work down to Irvine, so I was able to nuclear bomb some people in Fallout 3, and I kind of like showed her how it plays on the Steam. Noelle, you thought it looked pretty good on the Steam Deck, didn't you?
Oh, sure, totally. Yeah, no, it looked pretty good. It did look good. It was, your description of what you were doing was much better though.
The nuclear bomb.
He was like, "Watch this! I'm gonna nuclear bomb this guy." And I was like, "Oh, are you okay?" And
I was
then
like,
he
"Yeah, check it out."
died. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I did. That game can get hard if you're not like looking out and like being like managing your resources really well. Like you can just get wiped.
Speaking of nuclear bombs, I heard that Phil Spencer got a nuclear bomb in Fallout 76, but we'll talk more about that later on when we hit the Xbox section. But I couldn't help just making the connection because it's so funny that you mentioned that.
Nuclear
so
bomb.
I heard myself say that, and I was like, yeah, I'm nuclear bombing some enclave.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Noelle, what have you been up to? What have you been playing?
I'm deep into Baldur's Gate 3. I'm like maybe in my third run through of it. You know, there's just so much to discover in that game. It's like never ending. There's always a new choice. I love it.
Yeah. It's Maulding's favorite. If he was here, he would be like,
he'd be into
Baldur's Gate 3.
Right. We had to swap out. We lost one Baldur's Gate 3 expert. We had to bring in another one because it's just a requirement for a podcast. So thank you so much for filling that void.
It's no problem.
Of the three
Boulder
these are complete. Yeah, you've completed the game and started over, or how many times have you restarted too?
Oh yeah, no. I don't play on hard. I play a game to enjoy it. I'm not trying to do some honor mode bullshit where you like have to, I don't know, be perfect. So I played it all the way through twice, and I am halfway through the third run because you can like pick different people, and you can also be the main characters, which I haven't done yet, which I definitely want to do. But it's just a great game. It doesn't get old.
What class are you playing right now?
That's a great question. I went on a trip for 3 weeks, and my brain has been. I have not gotten back to the game. I'm trying to remember what it is. I think it's the singing one that I can't think of the word for.
Oh,
what person who
Bard?
sings?
I haven't played it. Oh.
Yeah, Bard. There we go. I'm playing
Eric, do you know what it was?
I think it's Bard. Yeah.
It's Bard. No, he's right. Yeah. It's Bard. I
just have a lot of friends that have played the game and always get to a point where like, oh, I wish I made a different decision. I'll just start the game over again. You know? After you sunk like 30, 40 hours in, it's just amazing.
Totally. Well, you just gotta I think you gotta save strategically in that game. So if you do want to make a new decision, you don't have to go all the way back. But that definitely happened to me. Like the run I'm in now, I guess I did sort of restart. Not completely, but it really, I made some wrong choices, and I was like, this is the worst. I can't keep going like this.
Yeah.
I can't live with myself. I'm out.
Yeah, totally. I can't do it.
All right, Eric, what about you? What are you playing?
I am playing, I know I'm a little late to the party, Dead Island 2. I just finished
it. Yeah, I just finished all the DLC.
Oh, I did. I just bought the expansion pass because it was on sale. Yeah, and I know they released the second DLC, which I've heard is better than the first DLC.
It is.
So 100. I'm excited to kind of jump into that. Got my first legendary hammer and was like going crazy, and then the game's over. And I'm like, wait, I just got my legendary hammer. What am I supposed to do with this?
Right.
So I'm excited to hopefully carry that into the DLC. That game is a blast. Kudos to Jam Busters. They pulled it off.
Agreed. I went apeshit on that one, though, and I became obsessed with the achievements because that's a game where you can get every single achievement. So I totally encourage you to achievement
I will.
That whole thing. Oh, yeah. The hardest one, just so you know, is you have to get 5 headshots with a crossbow, but it makes it easier if you put a mod on it that makes you reload faster, because then you have more time to get those 5 headshots. And also if you go to the blue crab and you get 5 zombies on the gate, they'll line up and then you can get your shots right there. So that's the only way I got that last achievement.
Serious hacks.
I love it.
Serious.
I'm gonna keep coming to you for my achievement help, because I'm sure I'll have some more.
Dude, I love that shit. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know. It's what's got me in the Xbox ecosystem is that. So Dead Island 2, and then I decided to go back. I hadn't played it in years. Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and went back to the original Mass Effect. I wanted to see kind of what they did differently. And I love that. I'm going full femshep renegade. Like I'm a badass. I'm shooting hostages. I'm doing terrible things, but I'm loving it. And I'm loving it except for the Mako stuff. I remember hearing like, oh, they redid the Mako stuff. It's easier. And I'm like, if this is easier, I don't remember what I played on the 360 because it is so brutal. That is not as much fun. But great series. I can't wait to get to Mass Effect 2 and then obviously 3 and play that whole thing out.
Nice.
Noelle, if you haven't played that, I have the Legendary Edition. I can let you borrow it.
Oh, you love that. If you like story games, especially and making decisions.
Classics.
Yeah, that's it. All right.
So good.
Great.
Right on. Myself, I've been playing Dave the Diver. I don't know if you guys have tried that one, but it is so good, and it's much bigger than I thought, and I've talked way too much about it on this podcast, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I've also talked a lot about Outlast Trials, which I've been having a blast with on co-op. And then basically a lot of my time is being taken up by Fallout 4. I'm deep into the DLC. I did the first DLC I did was for robots, and it was totally short, and I was just like, whatever. And then I did this whole Nuka World DLC, which is the soda, and it is unbelievably huge, and there's so much to do, and I was blown away that I wasn't expecting it to be that big. So if you have any interest in jumping out back into Fallout, I recommend Fallout 4. I know some people are playing 76, but I recommend Fallout 4 for sure.
You're playing it on Xbox?
DLC. Yeah.
You're playing obviously with the new next gen patch?
Yes,
I'm loving it. Well? Good.
Yeah,
that's what I was waiting for. I figured I'd let Mass Effect run its course and then go back and jump into Fallout.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I definitely
and
highly
then
recommend
place Fallout 3 and nuclear bomb some people.
Some people.
Exactly.
Don't sleep on it.
All right, so moving on, let's get to the headlines of the week because we've got a lot of Xbox stuff to talk about. So we'll jump right in. Essentially, this is headlines of the week, Xbox Dumpster Fire Edition, because a lot of them are going to be Xbox, so be prepared. I want to start on an IGN article that Ryan McCaffrey wrote, and I'm basically paraphrasing in it, but it gets us all up to speed to what's going on and what's been going down this week with our favorite green machine. In fact, it's so dramatic. Ryan McCaffrey entitled this thing, Phil Spencer and the Battle for Xbox's Soul. So if you thought I was dramatic calling it a dumpster fire, I think he managed to outdo me on this one. It's definitely worth checking out. He says, stop me if you've heard this one before. Xbox stepped on a rake again. For the upteenth time in the past decade, Microsoft has found itself on the wrong end of bad news. And as usual, it's self-inflicted. Just as Team Green was about to start gathering some positive momentum, Fallout is its biggest show on TV and boosting all of the Fallout games along with it. The launch of Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 is imminent and may be the very kind of prestige single-player, narrative-driven game that the brand has lacked. And the next Xbox showcase is announced for June 9th, where we're supposed to get to see the long-anticipated entry of Gears of War and the next Call of Duty Black Ops. So all of it's pretty positive, except for the Xbox brass was able to torch the morale of customers and quite possibly its own developers at the same time this week, a rare feat by a video game publisher. They did so by announcing the closure of 3 studios, Tango Gameworks, Arcane Austin, and Alpha Dog, and the consolidation of a 4th, Roundhouse. Fans were quick to point out a recent and now hypocritical quotes from Xbox executives themselves online, such as marketing boss Aaron Greenberg saying last year that the axed developer Tango Gameworks Hi-Fi Rush, quote, was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release. In 2021, Xbox documentary Power On, Sarah Bond said the leadership team asked themselves how to learn from and not repeat the mistake of acquiring a studio. In this case, she was talking about the original Fable developer Lionhead, only to shut them down. And 1 year ago, in the wake of Redfall's disastrous launch, Xbox Phil Spencer said, quote, one thing I won't do is push against the creative aspirations of our teams. When a team like Rare wants to do Sea of Thieves, when a team like Obsidian wants to do Grounded, when Tango wants to do Hi-Fi Rush, when everyone thought they were probably doing the Evil Within 3, I want to give the teams the creative platform to go and push their ability and push their aspirations. At best, these once reassuring quotes ring hollow today, and at worst, they're outright lies. So it's been basically a crazy week, for Xbox. It's been a crazy year with games being taken from being exclusive to Xbox console sales being disappointing to price increases on GamePass. And in fact, Bloomberg, unfortunately, just reported that Microsoft might not be done with making cuts to their staff. So this very well may get worse before it gets better. And for developers, that would mean further job losses. So before I keep blabbering on, I want to turn it over to you guys, and I want to ask, why can't Xbox stop tripping over its own feet? What's going on here in the Xbox business?
I mean, just initial reaction, it just seems like, I don't know, I can't help but blame Phil Spencer. He's over there like talking about buying Nintendo. He's like obsessed with Steam for some reason. he's obsessed with the cloud gaming. I just kind of feel like they just need like a better direction right now. And whoever was in charge during the 360 era, like, let's bring in those old heads back and like get them working again, because that was the correct stage of Xbox. And now things just seem to be going to the wayside. That's my take.
The vibes were so good during the 360 era, and then they lost them, right? And I don't disagree with you in that clearly there needs to be a change in management, either in their approach or the actual people themselves. And I don't want to certainly, recommend that people lose their jobs. Like, there's a ton of people that are getting impacted across the entire industry, and that's really terrible. But they're not doing what they need to be doing for us, which is making cool games that we want to buy consoles for, and that we want to tell our friends about. And I don't know, to your point, Matt, I don't know, is this a Microsoft pushing down on Phil, and then Phil has to push this down to the studios, or is this their strategy? We don't know, and I don't know if we'll ever know, but we know it's not working, and it's not working for us. And I think we've seen historically that Microsoft has said, or it's been commonly known, that Xbox is very hands-off with their developers. And that's great from a creative standpoint, like you were saying, Dan. Like, you want them to be able to stretch and do cool stuff. But maybe there's also some hands that should be put on if we're not getting the output and the kind of games that we need to be seeing in the pipeline coming out more often. That's just my quick take on that.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I think it's sort of, yeah, like you're saying, who really knows? I mean, it could be as simple as some CEOs trying to get even more money yearly by just like cutting whole departments. But overall, it's like they need to focus on what's actually working. I'm going to compare it to Shark Tank. I don't know if anyone here watches Shark Tank. I'm obsessed with it.
Sure, yeah.
But one of their main things is like, somebody comes in and they're like, but I have an idea for this, and I have an idea for that and that. And they're like, just focus on your business. And I feel like Xbox just needs to focus on the things that work, and not like gut all these things that are working, and not be so worried about the future, about like who knows why they're cutting. Maybe they're cutting because they have some like idea of what they think is going to happen, and instead of just focusing on what actually works.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point, it's like they may be making cuts because it's for the business, that it's a healthier business. That's what they're saying publicly, right?
Yeah.
That could be true, for what we don't have full visibility into what's going on at these studios. We know a lot of talent has left some of these. Redfall's notoriously had lost a lot of people that made the games that we all loved, and Redfall was not one of those games, unfortunately, and never will get there now.
Right.
So, maybe that studio, I hate to say it, but maybe that studio doesn't make sense in that world anymore if you don't have the people that made the game that was so special, and you've lost your creative talent. And I think you're going to see that, unfortunately, again with some of these future studios.
Yeah, but then you also have to ask yourself why your creative talent is leaving. Like, that's too. It's exactly. Like, what kind of environment are you creating when you have these excellent, creators just mass exiting,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And I think you guys touched on some important points. And some of the rumors and speculation that I'm hearing online is essentially that Microsoft itself is taking a more active role in the Xbox brand than ever before. In fact, it's now Microsoft Game Studios and not so much Xbox. They're saying that Satya Nadella and also Amy Hood, the CFO and CEO, basically are taking on a more hands-on approach and are forcing basically a return on investment. Because what happened here, I think we all see it here, is the Bethesda Activision King acquisition happened so fast, and they grew from pretty, well, comparatively small to so much larger now, and they are just buckling under the weight. I think it's probably, and I've said this before on the podcast, it's clearly an internal war is happening here. You've got people that are very passionate about games, and you've got people that are very passionate about money. And unfortunately, what's happening here is I see the money winning out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you grind culture.
Yeah.
Grind culture over there.
When you spend billions to acquire companies, I don't necessarily blame someone being like, okay, I just gave you all this. What are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for me now?
But games are such a long-term investment. It takes to make a good game. I'm like, you got to take your time. It's not some like output BS. Like, you can do like a bunch of horror movies and make a bunch of money off them. It's just not the same thing.
Yeah, they cost a lot of money. They cost a lot of time. You need a lot of people. Or for most.
And they're beautiful.
Indies, Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Stardew.
Yeah.
We were talking about Stardew Valley earlier.
Stardew
Valley
yeah.
is an anomaly in the game space, right? That doesn't really exist, especially at a Microsoft Game Studios, which is maybe they need to invest in more in companies like that. Like if they, I think the problem I have with Microsoft and with these announcements is what they're not doing is they're not delivering on the core foundation of. You have core franchises. You have Halo. You have Forza. I might not be a Forza fan, but I understand that Forza is important. You know, Halo is important. Gears is important. Like deliver those, and then experiment with all the other stuff. You got to be taking new swings and trying new, giving your teams, to what Noah was saying, giving them the freedom to do something without that fear of if this doesn't make 20 times what it costs, we're going to cut the studio. Like that sucks. That's not going to bring any creative talent to the studio.
Totally.
I definitely agree.
And something that just, I mean, this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but something that I feel like Microsoft, just like in general, this goes across the entire industry and every business. It's like, if you're going to praise something like Hi-Fi Rush and then turn around and close the studio almost like a year later, you just cannot do that. That to me is like the quickest way to just crumble whatever trust consumers have in your brand. It's a bad look, and they can't afford to be doing that kind of stuff.
Well, it sounds like they're going in and micromanaging, kind of like, you know, they were like, oh, we like this, let's get in there, like tell us exactly what you're doing, we'd like to input.
That's the problem. Now they're going to go course correct the opposite way, right? They're going to go whoosh, instead of doing somewhere in the middle is the ideal spot. You gotta, as a publisher, their job is to give the people the resources and guidance and foundation to build the cool shit that they're coming up with from scratch. They're not the creatives. So it's a little rough.
Totally.
Well, speaking of the creatives, let's talk a little bit more about it for people who might not be familiar with these studios and why it's kind of upsetting. So looking at all three of them, we've got Tango Gameworks, which gave us hits like Evil Within 1 and 2, which if you like Resident Evil, you're going to love those. And the critically acclaimed Hi-Fi Rush, which we mentioned a few times. Then you've got Arcane Austin, which came in with Dishonored, Prey, and Redfall, of course, and which we're going to talk a little bit more about later. And then you've got Alpha Dog Games, which is known more as ZeniMax Halifax, and it makes more mobile titles, but it also makes Wraithborn, Mighty Doom, and stuff you might have heard of there. So given this stable of studios that are now, you know, kind of kaput, are there any titles that are on this roster that you guys played that you loved, anything like that? What surprises you the most?
For me, well, Dishonored for one, just real quick. Dishonored's crazy that they're kind of like doing.
And they were pitching Dishonored 3 at the time.
Yeah,
they wanted to do it.
That hurts. I mean, Evil Within is a really good, like the first Evil Within is like comparable to Resident Evil 4. It's classic. Those two are for me are like kind of my standouts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the same page. I feel. I mean, listen, we're going to see a Dishonored 3. We're just not going to see it from that team, and that's kind of where I think they're missing the whole point. Is like you have this creative team that understands the DNA of what made those games good. Why wouldn't you want to give them the opportunity to do that again? And you know, like I said before, we don't know the full story of why they didn't when they came out to pitch them and said no. That happened with Fable. You brought up Sarah Bond. That happened with Fable 4 when Lionhead went to Sarah or to the Xbox and said, we want to make Fable 4. We need to step up. No. 10 years later, you know, Playground, Forza Racing, you do it instead. Like, what? I don't know what the thought process is there, but there's got to be something, we hope.
For sure.
Oh, man.
All right, moving on, let's talk about why Xbox did it. According to a new report on May 8th, in the aftermath of these surprising shutdowns, Xbox President Matt Booty and ZeniMax head Jill Braff held a large meeting with staff and laid out the reasoning behind the cuts. As reported by Bloomberg, during the meeting, Booty praised Hi-Fi Rush, but wouldn't go into specific details on why the studio behind the colorful action game had been shut down. Speaking more broadly, though, about the closings, Booty reportedly explained that Xbox and Bethesda studios had become spread too thin, like, quote, peanut butter on bread, and that the team leaders felt understaffed. The idea being that by closing studios, Xbox would free up resources elsewhere within the company. Booty also told staff at the meeting that Arcane Austin's closing had nothing to do with Redfall flopping with fans and critics. Reportedly, both Tango and Arcane Austin had pitched games to work on next, including a Hi-Fi Rush sequel and possibly a new Dishonored or a similar single-player immersive sim-like game. Those obviously won't be happening. So essentially, these games weren't working on something right now. They were pitching games to be created. And that's their excuse for why they cut these studios, is that they didn't have anything in active development. What do you guys think about these reasons? Do you believe them?
Bullshit.
I think a lot of studios. Yeah, I think a lot of game studios don't have stuff in active development, but they don't close their doors. That just seems, and being compared to peanut butter on bread is like,
That's
what
awful.
the heck?
So,
That is so
rude.
cruel.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
It's so rude. Yeah, it sounds like some PR BS that like somebody wrote for somebody to say. You know, I don't know.
Yep.
Doesn't ring
It
true.
sounds like what they're really saying is, we want you to make Fallout 5. We don't want you to make Hi-Fi Rush 2. So this is what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably what's motivating a lot of these changes, which is just the way that they're doing it. The messaging around it is awful. The actual actions are awful. It's just rough all around.
My question is, do these games then get sold to another studio, or do they just acquire them? What is
Which
the
games?
usual process?
What do you mean?
Like a Dishonored or a Hi-Fi Rush? Or...
That would essentially, they own it. They Microsoft Game Studios or Xbox, whoever the ultimate parent is owns that IP forever. So they can get anybody's studio to make that game.
Oh, okay.
It's just
that's so sad. Can you think like whoever created like whose little baby that was, you know, that has to like leave their baby behind to like go to another creative studio.
Yep.
That must hurt.
Yeah, totally.
And
Seriously.
you know those series are pretty much dead until someone maybe 10 years from now remembers them fondly, has a nice twist, and is able to convince their boss to like invest in it, because now these things are just going to lay dormant. I'm telling you, if Xbox could, you know, make games as well as they make drama, we would be in a much better world. I mean, it would be a great place. I do want to dive in a little bit more on the Redfall, because I found that one interesting. So essentially, the IGN had an article that was titled "Arcane Austin was working on a big Redfall update for May before Microsoft ditched the game and closed the studio." Now I know gamers can get, you know, very waxing philosophical and bummed out about things that never come, and maybe this is true, maybe this isn't true, so please take it with a grain of salt. But the article on IGN says, Microsoft's decision to close Studio Arcane Austin and halt all development on the game Redfall caught the developers by surprise. Arcane Austin had been actively working on the first-person shooter, including DLC content called the Hero Pass. This now canceled content was set to add 2 new characters to the vampire co-op shooter and was scheduled for release around Halloween. Unfortunately, the game's troubled history and a weak launch ultimately led to its demise, despite efforts to improve it. So what do you guys think about the message that's being sent here? Especially, we've seen success stories like No Man's Sky, which is the poster child for turning a disaster into a game that it's critically praised and has fans again.
Or even Fallout 76. That same deal. It launched really rough, and now it's pretty good.
And then you have games like that just take your money and then just get dropped on their ass. Like, what was the one with the flying Anthem? Oh my gosh. I'm so pissed I paid full price for that. And then they never made good on it. They just took my money.
Don't buy the expansion pass. Don't buy deluxe editions. That's the moral of the story, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, always.
So, what did you guys think of Redfall? Did you play it? Did you like it? Do you think there was able to be saved? What are your thoughts?
I played Back for Blood like a month before Redfall came out, and I think that to me is like a big issue with that game, because I just feel like it was too close. It had the same, like, it was like a Left 4 Dead-ish, like, because I never got my hands on it. I just figured, I was like, this looks exactly like Back for Blood. I'm gonna like swerve.
You don't need it.
Sorry, I don't need it. And that was just so sorry, Arcane, but I had to not get involved.
You didn't miss much. I mean, it wasn't ready. It doesn't feel like it was ready for prime time, and they just dropped it because they had to turn a profit or meet a schedule. And there's potential there if they put another 2 years. Maybe this update could have been something that magically transformed it. I have my doubts, but you know, I like to be an optimist and hope that it would have been. But to your point, Matt, it basically was Back for Blood open world. You know, you ran around and do missions, and there's a kernel that is fun, the kind of the game loop. There's something there, but the aiming didn't work. The AI was terrible. The environments were empty.
I had textures that just didn't ever
Didn't
load
pop
in.
sometimes.
In the base there was the worst one was in the main base. There was a seal. I don't know what the seal was, but it was all pixelated on the bottom. And I was thinking to myself, when that game released, how could you not like fix something that's in the main base where the character is going to be running in and out of constantly? It was just oversights like that just blew my mind.
And the biggest problem with the game is it's a co-op multiplayer action game from a studio that makes Dishonored and Prey and all these amazing immersive simulators that people love, that are story driven, you know. And I get wanting to experiment and try these different things, but it just didn't work.
Ugh,
I agree.
You hate to see it.
Unfortunately, I have not played it. But I did Google it. It has 24% of video game people liked it. So, you know, there you go.
I think there
Dan's
was
one of them, it sounds like.
I know. No, I did. Okay.
No, Dan loves a good bad game. That's one thing about Dan.
So is it an open world, like, shooter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Did you also think, this is sort of a side note, but I feel like because of certain games, how well an open world does, it's kind of like the norm now. And so they deliver these games that are sort of half-baked with this like open world where you like, if you really try to explore, there's nothing there because they pushed it through. Like I probably suffered from that.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than an open world game when you come across a door and you can't open it. Then don't make it a door.
Right? What's
make it a
the
wall.
point?
Make it a window. Make it something.
I totally agree.
Yeah, totally. Or when the things, I don't know if you guys played the Harry Potter game. I did.
Yes.
And,
it's a great game.
I play everything.
Do you think it's a great game? I thought it was so repetitive. I was really
underwhelmed.
underwhelmed. It felt like it was like a forced open world game where I was like, you spent all your time on Hogwarts and the rest of it was like you phoned it in. I feel like I could have coded that. Like, what is this bullshit?
I mean, I'm going to jump back. I'm going to defend it's a great game. It's a great Harry Potter game.
Yeah.
It's great for kids, maybe. The Hogwarts.
But
I
like
will give
if
them
you love
that,
the universe. Yes, that's what I mean. Like you get to be part of the, you know, the different houses and you get to explore this time. Like
Hufflepuff.
I thought
I know you're such
Slytherin.
a Hufflepuff. That's so
or I want to be Slytherin. I think I'm a forced Gryffindor. I don't want to be Gryffindor. But
I was Hufflepuff.
Oh, nice. But like, I thought the attention to detail was good, but I agree with you. There was a grinding nature to what you had to do.
It was just all the outside world. But I feel like games like that, like when I do play a game that I don't like, which sounds like this one, I'm not sure I'd be into. But overall, it's like when you get to the outside, these like open world quests you go on have nothing behind them and they're the same. Like I felt that with Cyberpunk. I know that Cyberpunk had a lot, like it was real up and down, whatever, but like the main storyline was great, and then there was like these side quests. You just kept killing all these weird cops, and you're like, "Why am I doing this? And like, what's the point of this?" You know?
I gave up on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I did it all because that's how I play a game, but it was like boring after a while. It's like if you're gonna have all these quests, they gotta be like you gotta be like Red Dead Redemption 2. Like I feel like it's one of the best ones where like every quest is different and unique, and it's you know there's a reason to go and find that new thing.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I think that's why I never connected with Horizon Zero Dawn. Look, it's cool. It's beautiful. It does some cool dinosaur stuff. But there was the world was so open and so empty. And then I turned around and I play something like Breath of the Wild, where the world is so crafted, bespoke. There's something cool and beautiful around every corner that just for me to discover. If I just go around there, my curiosity is going to be rewarded every time. And that is a really powerful feedback loop for me, that rewarding of the curiosity. And you're right, those open worlds that don't have that are just phoned in, are boring as hell.
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild, wow.
I have Breath of the Wild tattoo because I love it so much.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wait, that is awesome.
Yeah. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I know, Noelle, we were talking about Death Stranding, also another classic.
We shouldn't talk about it, though. We're going to talk about it later.
I know.
That's going to be my thing. That's going to be one of my games that was really awesome.
Just I'm just like thinking of open world. Like I do think like my only criticism in that game is if there's a little bit more to exploring, like you would find a little bit more, even though that world was
but I don't know, because the whole point of it was that the outside world is death. You know, if anything, and more like maybe you could go into the places and explore like the underground more, like, or be a part of it at all. But I think that was also part of like you're supposed to feel alienated in that game. Like you're not supposed to like it. I think kind of.
Gosh, love it.
All right, moving on though, because I could definitely talk about this all day. I want to hit on one more Microsoft leak that kind of came out during all of the crazy. I'm telling you, when it leaks or when it rains, it pours on these rumors and news and that sort of stuff. And Xbox is definitely no shortage of stories coming out this week. So the last one I want to touch on here is GameSpot wrote an article called "Call of Duty on Game Pass is not guaranteed. Microsoft having internal debates about it." So we all remember the promise that Phil Spencer gave us as gamers. If we were to invest in this ecosystem, and Game Pass would be that everything would be day one release, all Xbox games in this thing. And apparently, so there's some questions. I guess the financial people are asking a lot of questions here, and whether that makes sense or not. So the GameSpot article, just to summarize it a bit, says, according to a new report, Call of Duty might not be hitting Game Pass. Per the report, Microsoft has had internal debates about whether to put Call of Duty's latest releases on the service. Call of Duty is one of the top-selling video games in the world, and there's apparent concern that placing the next title on Game Pass will only hurt its revenue stream. Per the report from The Verge, Microsoft has considered another increase of the price of Game Pass Ultimate since a final decision hasn't been made. Quote, "It could mean we will still see Call of Duty in the future on there, but there will be an increase in the price." So what do you guys make with that?
It sounds par for the course, everything you're telling us. I don't know. It sounds sounds like what they do.
Yeah.
Phil
but they
Spencer
just raised
making
the
empty
price,
promises.
They just raised the price. So I'm like, who do you think you are, Netflix?
But Call of Duty is I mean, as a business, I don't blame them. As an Xbox fan, I hate them for this decision. But it's like, I think it's famously.
They haven't made it yet. To be clear, this is all rumored. I'm just
but I'm telling you right now, there's no way that Call of Duty is day one on Game Pass. There's just no way, because think about it. Every Game Pass game that has been reported has famously cut sales. They've had a huge impact on any game that goes on Game Pass against sales. So if they're trying to make money, they're in make money mode right now. They're not in please the gamer mode. So I find it really hard to think that day one we're going to see the next big Call of Duty. Yes, it will goose some Game Pass subscribers, but not at the level that they want. But I don't want to put that into the ether, because I want it to happen. I don't want to pay $60-$70 for Black Ops, Gulf War, or whatever it is. But I do want to play that game.
I think it sounds to me like the whole company's they're like pretending like they're cutting the fat, when in actuality, I think they're just cutting back everything to see how much can we get people to still pay us without creating or giving them anything new. And they're going to do it until almost everybody, like you do that until you strangle yourself. And I mean, it's just stupid. But I get it. From a financial aspect, it's probably great.
Yeah, we hate all the business decisions that they're making, but because they don't really benefit us as players.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. Like, Call of Duty is going to sell like hotcakes no matter what. And I feel like having it on Game Pass could be, I think that's probably going to take a hit, but they can't say everything's going to come to Game Pass then if it's just not. And again, like I was saying, Phil is saying it's coming, don't worry, everything's good, and then it just doesn't. It just keeps cementing in the consumer's brain that it's just not. It's all like a carrot on the stick. It's like, don't worry, Game Pass is everything you want it to be, and then it's not.
So here's my question, though. The last time that Xbox gave us bad news, a week later, they turned around and announced that Diablo was coming to Game Pass to try and change our minds, change the negative tune that was going on, because that's when they announced that games won't be exclusive, and all games won't be exclusive from their studios, that they will be putting them on PlayStation. And then next week, they're like, oh yeah, have some Diablo, which I'm super pumped for, because the Season 4 comes out next Tuesday. So cool. Definitely be playing that. Just a small reminder for those of you who've been holding out like I have. But do you think any chance that they could drop a game on Game Pass to help change the negative PR cycle that we've got? And if so, which game would it be?
I mean, we don't even know what they have in the hopper to even potentially be that. I mean, I think they'll probably put old Call of Duty. Maybe they'll put last year's Call of Duty out there, but I don't even know. I don't know what I even would want it to be.
Noelle, what do you think?
No, I don't play Xbox, guys.
Stardew update?
You got the Stardew update,
Stardew.
right? Hope. I mean, that would be sick.
I'm waiting for it.
I'd become.
Could you
I'd buy an
imagine?
Xbox. Yeah.
Start.
It'd be so
Yeah.
great.
I've heard maybe they might do a big library game.
That's what I'm thinking. It's got to be something from the library.
So it's going to be like 600 360 games that they drop or something along those lines. I feel like it has to be that.
That would be smart of them
really
to try to be like, sorry, guys. Will you forgive me?
Yeah.
Please.
Here's our best content.
Yeah.
Just throw it to the gamers.
Remember this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Remember how good we are? Yeah. So I think that could be what ends up happening. I mean, Dan, yes, no, maybe, possibly.
Do you know the answer, Dan?
Yeah, please tell us.
Yes.
I will tell you next week when I'm sure it's going to happen. I'm telling you, they're going to do something and it's going to be awesome. But before we find out what that is, we got to move on real quickly. We're running short on time, but I do want to touch on Helldivers since I know that's such a huge game right now. Because Helldivers had a little controversy this week, but not as big as Xbox, of course, but worth noting because that game has been really pretty solid and that community has really been turning on it. It hasn't been turning on it. It's been one of the most positive gaming communities I've had the pleasure of being part of. There's a couple of things with capes and all that sort of stuff, but nothing to the degree that we experienced this week. So in summary, Helldivers 2 was actually pulled from sale in 177 countries due to the PlayStation rule that the PC version needed to have the PSN linking requirement in the actual game itself, meaning you had to have a PlayStation account. And unfortunately, PlayStation accounts aren't available worldwide. The game being delisted from 177 countries set off a lot of alarm bells from a lot of fans. The decision came after Sony announced the players on Steam would have to have these accounts, even though they're free. The players rebelled and basically started responding in the Steam reviews and tanking the actual review, which had been very high at the time. The reviews plummeted due to this requirement, and the community rallied to reverse the decision, which actually happened. Then, shortly after that, Helldivers 2 wanted to do Operation Cleanup to give positive reviews back to the game. So the community is so nice that once they, were no longer forced to create these accounts, they came back and started cleaning up reviews. And the actual Helldivers 2 boss came out, and Johan Pilestead said that he was really impressed and heartened by the community's, response to this and cleaning up and everything like that. But then, shortly thereafter, his response, fans noticed that Arrowhead Studios community manager Spitz was no longer a part of the Reddit and the community after encouraging players to review bomb and refund the game. So even though they reversed their decision, even though they did the right thing, even though the players did the right thing, they still fired the community manager for making a post that said, hey, players, make your displeasure known through reviews, refunds, etc. gives us more pull in the discussions with Sony. So he's pulling back the curtain, essentially revealing that this is something that Sony wants, not what Arrowhead wants. And he's encouraging people to rebel, and of course was fired and hasn't made a comment since. So that's essentially all of the stories that happened for Helldivers 2 this week. What do you guys think? Where do you, what do you think was the biggest thing, and how do you respond to a lot of this?
Oof, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, I think it's amazing community. Think about Steam reviews and think about all the garbage Steam reviews you read and people play for like 500 hours and say, this game sucks. Like that happens all the time. Think about the fact that people bombed the game and now we're going back in and pruning that back. Like that's a huge testament to Arrowhead and what they've forged with the game. So kudos to them for that. But at the other hand, it's like review bombing works. Like we always say, like, oh, people do this on Metacritic and do this other thing. It doesn't work. It's like, no, it actually does. It hits the bottom line. And I think that's cool. But as a company, you can't necessarily encourage that if you're in business with another company. You know what I mean? So it's complicated. It's really complicated. It's a shitty situation all around. But at the end of the day, gamers won. Right?
Yeah.
You guys
It
feel
looks
like you
like
won?
it. It looks like it. Yeah.
I think
Maybe.
it's kind of like, gamers, you got us this time. But it was noticeable that Ghost of Tsushima is now having its multiplayer have the PlayStation link as a mandatory requirement, and it's because that fan base isn't as large or as vocal. So this is clearly something they're not backing down on. But I don't want to what do you guys think, Noelle?
Yeah, I think it's a really nice story, but I think people talk about gamers and communities as being toxic sometimes, and it's such a nice story of how untoxic. And I really support the community. I think that's awesome to fall on your sword for the good of the people, kind of thing.
That's a good
way
to
put
it.
Nice, yeah.
He said,
but
he said that.
Suck,
he said his job is to represent the community, and he was doing his job.
He definitely did it. Yeah, for sure. They should make a movie about him, like Norma Ray. Impressive. But yeah, I just don't even get the point of I don't know. The big companies just want money. It's just, this is all about capitalism. I think all of the drama we're talking about is just about how to make more money.
And that's a sign of the times. No, that definitely 100%. Is true.
My theory on this whole situation, I think I've already told Dan a little bit about it. I think it's kind of more, this was going to be Sony's test from the beginning, is this hook up your PSN account to the game on Steam. And they didn't realize that Helldivers 2 was going to be such a big game and such a pretty much a community that is so active. They didn't realize that everyone was going to band together and rebel in this fashion. So I think this was planned from the get-go. They were going to have it link and then see what the reaction was. And in this case, it really backfired. And so Sony had to really backpedal a ton. And then this is the end result. It's true. It's a win currently, but I think eventually, I don't think this is the last of Sony's PlayStation Network.
We're going to lose the war. But if it was day one and it was working, probably we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now, and people would have been probably unhappy that they had to link an account, but would have done it.
Yes.
Totally.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Let's go to listener emails. All right.
High production around here.
Yeah, we love it.
I liked it.
All right. This week, Woody from Los Angeles, California writes into goodplayingwithyou@gmail.com, just like you can, and asks, what are some of the most surprising moments you've had in video games? Which got me thinking, and it's a pretty good question. So from the death of a certain character in The Last of Us 2 to Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, No Russians missions, the history of video games are filled with shocking moments. But sometimes the biggest surprises in video games aren't the ones we hear about online or talk with our friends. Sometimes the biggest surprises are the ones you discover yourself. So team, what are two of your most mind-blowing moments in video games? Let's start with you, Lord.
Yeah. All right. So take yourself back to 2002, and young Matt was just on his PlayStation 2, and he just got the first PlayStation 2 Ethernet adapter, and he was plugging it in. And then I played the first multiplayer game on the PlayStation, which was Tribes Aerial Assault, which is very Halo-esque. And at that time, I was just like, you cannot play multiplayer games on a console. And so when this was happening, I had my DSL, high-speed internet, went fancy. I don't even know. Just, so, I know. I couldn't believe it. My family's laggards, and we had DSL. It was so strange. And we were playing Tribes Aerial Assault. I think you could play split screen. It was just so in my mind back then, my jaw was to the floor. It was so cool. I just watched some old footage of it, and I was like, this game was so ahead of its time. It's crazy. Jetpacking around, jumping, awesome times. Take me back to 2002.
I know your first online experience. There's nothing like it. That's awesome.
It really was amazing.
I hate to bring it up again, Baldur's Gate 3. There's a fight. You go to the hell and you fight this guy that you've been talking, this demon. And normal video games, right? There's music in the background, whatever. But you start fighting this demon, and then suddenly he starts singing. And it was surround sound singing as you're fighting this guy. And it was very, I don't know, it was one of the first times I was like, whoa, I have been you're in the game usually. And it really sort of brought me into the present. It was really cool. I think it's a really incredible part of the game. with his weird ass song that I then like played for everybody. I would see that. I'd be like, hey, guys, can you listen to this? Like, this is what happened while I was playing this video game. Can you just hear this song? And then way back in the day, I mean, I think like if I talk about like games I can remember really blowing my mind, like the very first the very first what's the very impressive game that you play? You drive a car and you shoot people, and it was on PlayStation 1, and it's the most famous game.
Twisted
Grand
Metal.
Theft Auto.
Then Grand Theft Auto. Thank you. I couldn't think of the name. Grand Theft Auto. I remember playing that at first. I grew up with an N64, and so I was playing those kinds of games. And then I convinced my dad at Fry's to buy me a PlayStation 1 and the game at Costco. And I remember being like, there's a radio in this car and I can change the stations. Like, it wasn't even about the game storyline. It was like, there's a hospital, like I can have the police chase after me. Like, just having so much choice in a game, I think was really mind-blowing as a kid.
Yeah, that is
so
awesome.
good.
Eric, what's yours? Or one of yours?
I would say I'm going to use Control as one of those games. I love the game. And I remember having this moment because the game it's like a kind of a shooter, but it's a mystery and you're getting these powers. And there's a moment where everything just kind of clicks around the ashtray maze portion when the walls are sliding and there's infinite doors. And it's like this really like, visually impressive arrangement and levels, and then you're killing and shooting enemies, and the music kicks in, and it's that old gods of Asgard, that band, and it's like, take control, and it's like it just all clicked. I was like, I am taking control, and I was like shooting everything, and I'm flying through the things, and the walls are bleeding, and I'm like, this is the greatest game of all time. I just love that. That was like a recent note. And then on a kind of a smaller note, to go back to like when Xbox, I was really excited about kind of like new Xbox games, was when Carrion came out. That was the game where you were like a creature, you were like a monster, and the game opens with like you coming out of like a test tube, and the goal, it's like a reverse monster game where you're running around eating people, like you kind of are climbing around the area. And I remember that moment of like, this game is kind of cool, but when you break through a door and there's a guy, he's like, help me, and you grab him and you chew him up into pieces and you get stronger from that. I'm like, this might be the game for me. I mean, I'm just like, this is just fantastic. And I wish we had more of that coming to Game Pass. I need more games like those types of experiences.
It was definitely unique, that's for sure. I have to say, for my first one, it was no surprise, it's BioShock. But don't think it's the twist everyone is thinking of in BioShock. I love Would You Kindly. That's amazing. And everyone did talk about that one. So I kind of knew going in, but also I wasn't a big first-person shooter at this time. But I had a 360 and everybody was into it. And I didn't like the first-person perspective. I was very much like, it has to be, third person. But then there was this game, BioShock. The music was beautiful. It was gothic. Yeah, it was first person, but it wasn't like a shooter. Don't get me wrong. I love a Call of Duty shooter, and I'm probably playing Halo this weekend. But this one was something different I had never seen before. And it was, it was storytelling, and it was atmospheric, and it was like unbelievable. So I jumped in the game, and then the first thing shocked me was you can harvest little girls to level up. Let me repeat that one. You could, and my mind literally was blown. I was like, oh my God, if I harvest her, I get more of this atom, but if I save her, I get less. But what you don't know is you get a bonus and a better ending, that sort of thing later. So it's like this whole morality thing, which other games have done, but it just blew my mind that it was with a living human girl. That was crazy. And then the second part of that is playing the game, you are always running from these big daddies, and they are the biggest bosses, and essentially, I mean, there are other bosses, but they're essentially these main creatures that are in the game that you're always trying to take down as best you can. And then towards the end, you start gathering pieces, and you eventually, the whole game turns, and you become the big daddy, and you have to take these little girls through the world. And I was just like, that's the greatest game ever. And that was even before I got to the twist with the Would You Kindly part. My mind probably caved in about 3 times in that game, and I absolutely adore it. I just played it this past year because it's on when it was on Game Pass, or I picked it up really cheap, but it still holds up. Fantastic game. Lord, what was your number 2?
Yeah, my number 2 is I have to say it, like, I feel like the Guitar Hero craze like had an impact on me.
For sure.
I was at the time I was working at GameStop, and then we had a demo of it, and I was like, what is that? Like, I gotta play this game. And I remember just like I had just shifts where I was like playing Guitar Hero, and it inspired me to learn the guitar in real life. But during that, like, you'd be playing like Journey on the like, it was just, and like that stuff. It's too bad Guitar Hero like just was the quickest video game fad of all time, but it was such a cool little blip in the video game
Very fun
industry. Like, it really was cool. And then you had GarageBand, which was like the whole set. And then but just my honorable mention is Max Payne Bullet Time.
Oh,
that was
definitely a mind blower.
Yeah,
I think my last one is Red Dead Redemption. That game, I know I've talked endlessly about how I don't care for Red Dead Redemption 2, but Red Dead Redemption 1 was
get out
such
of here.
art.
Yeah, what's going on? Why did we come on?
But let me explain real quickly why Red Dead Redemption 1 was so superior and such art. First off, the whole story, starting from top to tail, about John Marston and his, the gang he used to run with, and him seeking redemption and coming to this town, going to be with his wife, being a good man, to raise his son, to stand by his wife, to live on a farm. And yet then law enforcement and everybody gets involved, and they go and they make him hunt down his old associates, because of course he's got the connections, he's going to know where they are. And they tell him, if you do this, then you will be free. And so he starts to do this. So immediately, I think the story is just incredible. And the ending is incredible. But what blew my mind was one teeny tiny mission that I thought was the coolest thing that probably most people might not have noticed. And so I wanted to call it out, because for me, it's truly special. At the end of the game, after you've done everything, you go back to this ranch. And yes, Rockstar are famous for their epilogues, but this one was truly superior to anything they've ever done before. You get the opportunity to be a good man, to stand by your wife, to raise your child. And the game and your wife, Sarah, and everybody else continually ask you, you have lived a life of chaos. You have been crazy and wild. Can you actually be calm? Can you actually be a good man and do the right thing and be a good husband and be a good father? They continually ask that of John. But what turns out is they're actually asking it of you and the player. The moment is a couple missions after you're back on the homestead, you are with your son and you are herding sheep. You go across a field because you need to get all the sheep and you need to bring them back. A pretty mundane, boring mission for such an exciting game. But right through the middle of this, a train comes through and it's being robbed. And there are guys shooting their guns and it's really exciting. And you've been on train robberies before. You know how this works. You can totally do it. But do you? Because that's exactly what the game is asking you in that moment. Do you take that opportunity to jump back into that old crazy lifestyle? Or do you stay with your son and show him what a good man does? And do you finish herding those sheep and you go back to your wife without causing any problems? That's the mission. Although it doesn't explicitly state it at all, it just puts it out there. And as a player, you have to decide yourself. And that blew my mind.
And what did you choose?
I was a good man.
Rob the train.
No, I did not. Well, I was curious. I was like, if I don't rob this train, will the game fail me? Is this an optional thing? So I didn't do it.
Was there an achievement tied to it? Because that really would guide the decision.
That's the real question. That's the so just the concept of that mission, and how deep that was on a metaphorical level. I was like, oh my God, video games are art. This is incredible. You can't do this with TV. It doesn't touch you in the same way, and you're not as involved. And so I was like, whew, hook, line, and sinker sold on that game. It was incredible. Any other last mentions or anything before we wrap up?
I mean, Death Stranding. I've heard that you don't like it, Dan, but I think that game is such a... I think it's almost made so you don't like it, but I love that, like, the innards of it are just like a simple sort of like move this from A to B game. And then it's the trappings of this world that just, I think, are so beautiful and so awful at the same time.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more, Noel. Well said.
Yeah.
It's so good. That's
I
right.
would definitely say that
the
the Strand nature is new and mind-blowing in terms of video games stuff. Like, that was really cool. I wanted to like it.
Yeah. I love that
wanted
online
to
aspect.
like it. That was the key part. Wanted
I
to
tried
like
so,
it.
I tried so hard because Lord made me buy the director's edition, not just the
I did.
regular edition. He made me go in
Oh,
deep,
yeah.
and so I did it on his recommendation,
Classic.
and then I was like,
By that time, I'd
Yeah.
sunk like 100 hours into it. I'm like, this is the game.
It
You gotta
is
get
the
in
I'm
here.
sure I
game.
used
and
your
just
zip line
fill.
at some point or did something.
Yeah.
You know, that would be
Yeah,
cool.
for
Probably.
sure. A road of some
Oh, so
kind.
good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I hope so. Dan contributed nothing to all of us. But
I truly,
Dan, come
truly,
on.
as Dan's tend to do. All right, on that note, we need to start wrapping things up. One more
Yeah.
time, I want to say special thank you to our special guests, Noel and Eric. Also, please make sure that you are subscribed on our socials so that you don't miss a new episode, which we have every week. And that's pretty much all the time we have today. On behalf of the Good Playing With You crew, Matt Lord, Noel Stewart, Eric X. Stein, and myself, Dan Whitehill, have a great weekend, and as always, good playing with you.
Good playing with you.